The problem though is you have, and like anything else, you have people who make their own, not just their own assumptions. Essentially, you have people who make their own definitions.
Yeah.
So they're going to call self-hate not what you just broke down so eloquently. No, they're going to call self-hate simply, I don't care if it's your preference or not, Demetrius, or whoever the so-called black man is. I don't care if it's your preference. I don't care if you date other. I don't care if you do date black girls too, Hispanic girls too, Mexican girls too. I don't care if you do date a Filipino. It don't matter. The fact that you're also dating them and you're posting it on social media or you're talking about how much you love this person, the reason why it's self-hate, Demetrius, and you won't ever get it is because you don't even realize it.
That's just a terrible thing.
What do you say to somebody like that?
I'm so glad you brought this up because this happened to me. It has happened. What you are talking about has happened to me. So that's why I have such a visceral reaction to this. Because for me, when you ask me, what do you say to that? You don't say anything. You just don't say anything. And I'm sorry if I'm getting a little angry.
No, go for it.
You don't. The point is, I love somebody. I don't give a shit what their skin looks like. I love you, Mom. I love you not because you're African American. I love you because you worked your ass off to support me and you were a mother and a father. I love you because of your heart, because of your brain, because of the sacrifice that you made for me. It has nothing to do with your skin color. I'm not going to love a woman or a man because of their skin color. I'm going to love them because of who they are as a human being, which is why I love you. And so I feel so bad for anybody who's put into that box to have to explain why they love somebody who's a different color. I should not have to do that. You should not have to do that. Nobody should have to do that.
Everyone has secrets. The definition of a secret is something private that we don't want other people to know about. Well, I want to talk about everything on my podcast. Kind of like snitching, but not really snitching. Racism, bullying, incest, lack of culture, religion, sports, politics, interracial dating, sexism, gender inequality, etc. For many of those topics, people don't like to talk about and like to keep their opinions to themselves, like secrets. And if they do talk about it for some of those topics, especially racism and politics, people won't be completely honest about it because of what they believe the backlash will be. So therefore, they try to be politically correct.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Interracial dating. Such a sensitive topic. Such a sensitive topic. Now, for this episode, I could have, sat down, obviously, with anyone of, a different nationality, demographic, upbringing, experience, from myself, going by America, I'm identified as an African American, male. And I could have sat down with another African American male or an African American female or woman. I could have sat down with, a Caucasian man or woman, Hispanic. I could have sat down with a multitude of people. And, the conversation obviously would have varied. It would definitely be different depending on who I'm talking to. And none of those people in, particular are going to speak for, an entire group of people, which is something, not that I've learned, but something that's definitely has been reminded, over and over and over since I've been in grad school in one of my classes, which is when you're speaking, you probably shouldn't be trying to speak for an entire group of people, because I understand we're emotional people and I understand we're passionate when it comes to certain topics. But when you make that jump to wanting to speak for other people, with all due respect, you can sometimes make a fool of yourself, because there's no group of people where everyone in that group feels the same on every topic. It's impossible, right? So when I thought about, and this was something when I thought about doing the podcast, this is definitely going to be a topic that I was going to cover, because again, it's a very sensitive topic. But I went ahead and decided that the first time I talk about the interracial dating is going to be with Miss Ashley Figueroa, who is a classmate of mine at the Clinton School of Public Service, master's program in Little Rock, Arkansas. And she actually reached out to me, and I appreciate it. And she's on my podcast today. Hey.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited about it.
Thank you. Ashley, where are you from?
Well, I was born in California, grew up in Arkansas, and spent a lot of time in Las Vegas. And so when people ask me where I'm from, I always say Las Vegas because that's where I spent my teenage years. And I feel like your teenage years are where you grow into the person that you're going to be. So I find myself saying I'm from Las Vegas.
Interesting.
Yeah.
From Las Vegas. That's always one of those places. When I hear someone say they're from a place like that, I'm like, well, you can't be from Las Vegas. You can't be from Hollywood. Like, you can't be from those places because those are only places people visit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they don't have hospitals for people to be born there. But that's not the case.
No.
What was it like growing up? Did you have a great childhood?
No.
How would you describe your childhood?
It could be worse. I always make sure that I say that because I never want to place myself in this section of people when I say that I didn't have a great childhood, because there's a lot of people who had it way worse than me. But growing up in Las Vegas, I didn't grow up, in that glamour that you might associate with Las Vegas. I grew up a block away from the Strip, in a hood, in an apartment, with hookers on the corner and drug dealers on the street. And
this is something you saw as a child?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I grew up with it, and it was fine for me because that's what I knew. My grandfather raised me, and that's just the conditions that we lived in, but it was normal for me. Looking back now, that I live in a nice neighborhood and, I have that safe feeling. I realized how unsafe I was then.
Wow.
And so it's interesting to look back on that. But no, I don't think I would have considered it a great childhood in that way.
Did you grow up with both parents?
No.
Mother in the home, father in the home, what?
I grew up as a small child. My mother and a stepfather, my sister's father, they got divorced and sort of had a really terrible step-parent situation. I live with both of my step-parents, and they just really kind of didn't want me because I reminded them of my mother. And so they drove me to Las Vegas when I was 11 and left me on my grandfather's doorstep. I never knew him, really. I knew he existed, and he always helped me out, paid for things, but we never had any relationship, so.
Okay, what do you, if you don't mind me asking, and a lot of people are, I'm one of those people, I always say I'm okay with the uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with the uncomfortable. But I guess I should say that when I'm talking to other people who sees it that way, because I don't see it as the uncomfortable. I'm never intentionally rude to people.
Sure.
I just talk to people. I love people. I love conversations. I love dialogue. So when someone if the average person was to ask this question, they'd give like some type of forewarning or something. Nothing I say to you today or ever will come from a place of malice.
Perfect.
I will not have malice intent. I always have the best intention. So what do you identify as, nationality wise?
That's such an interesting question.
Yeah.
I've always identified as Hispanic, but I never really knew what ethnicity I was, right? So I knew that I was Hispanic. I feel Hispanic. I look Hispanic. My father's name was Rojas. I'm Hispanic, but I don't really know if I was Spanish or if I was Mexican. I never really got that family history. So I'm glad you asked that because I recently did the Ancestry DNA test, right? So I'm like, I want to find out what my true roots are. Like, if I'm Spanish, I want to be able to shout it from the rooftop. Like, I am a Spanish woman. So excited to find that out. I got my results back and I am 65% English. Like 100% English. I'm 2%, well, not 100%, 65% English, 2% Spanish, 7% mix of like native and Mexican, like sort of indigenous population is what they called it. So essentially, I'm less than 10% Hispanic. And I had a total meltdown. Like it was a shit show. It was a shit show when I got these results because I felt like my entire identity had just been completely stripped away from me. This result is telling me that I'm just white, that everything that I associated with and the people that I felt closest to, that I related to, that I look like, I'm not a part of that. Are you kidding? That was a hard thing to swallow.
How long ago was this?
A couple months.
Oh, this is very recent.
Yes.
Okay, so Ashley, this is very interesting that you bring this up because that alone kind of solidifies for me personally. It solidifies for me why it is that going by this thing called race or nationality and trying to judge people solely based off this. And I get it. We've been here and done this over many years, but I'm just going to reiterate this just a little bit. This is why it's silly, because you can go your entire life believing that you're something, which has nothing to do with your personality, right? Has nothing to do with your heart. And you can the entire time be something else. You can't look at someone and know what they are as a person. Just like I can't look at you, which is why it's respectful, in my opinion, in my assessment, for me to ask you,
sure,
what do you identify as? Because do you identify as woman? Do you identify as man? Do you identify as heterosexual, homos? I think it's important to know these things about people because you can make these assumptions.
Right.
I can look at you and say you're an attractive, beautiful woman, but that can be, taken the wrong way because maybe you don't identify as those things,
right,
especially in 2020.
Right. Absolutely.
For those of you, those who listen to my podcast, and I have a great sense of idea of the group of people, being a podcast host, I get an idea here and there of, how many people from different, places listen to my podcast. And it's great. And I'm still learning how to read the analytics and everything. But a great deal of my group of people, I won't make assumptions for them because we were just talking about assumptions. But some of them may not understand the difference between, you talked about Hispanic, Mexican, Spanish.
Sure.
Now, you got some people who will say, you can't be Spanish. You can be Hispanic. Spanish is a language, not a person, So break that down for those who don't quite understand the difference.
Right. So when I say Spanish, I mean from Spain. So
absolutely,
part of my ancestry, not a lot that I can tell now, was from Spain. So it's different. So if you're Spanish, your history is from Spain. Your ancestors came from Spain. That's not a language. That's a country. Spain is a country. Just like Mexico is a country. If your family is from Mexico, you could identify as Mexican. That's not a language. You're Mexican. Or if you're from Puerto Rico, you're Puerto Rican. But I feel like Hispanic, for me, that word encompasses all of that, right? So if you're Hispanic, you could be Mexican, you can be Spanish, you can be Puerto Rican, you can be from Honduras, you can be any of the number of those Latin American countries, and you're Hispanic. I think that's just a way to sort of, I don't want to say politically correct, but if someone said I was Hispanic, I wouldn't be insulted by that. I just feel like it's a general term for people from Latin America.
Thank you. Wow. If that's not a lot of clarity for you all out there who might not have understood the difference, Miss Ashley just broke that down for you. Thank you. Of course, that's how I think. That may not be everyone, but that's what I think. It's ambiguous. Like you can feel differently about what that.
Oh yes.
Never mind.
Like you said at the beginning, you don't want to speak for anybody else. So I'm not speaking for anybody else's experience. I can just say for me, that's how I felt. And in the people that I have interacted with throughout my life, which I feel is a large number of different colors.
Yeah.
They don't get angry if you call them Hispanic. But I will say, if you call a Mexican person, Puerto Rican, or if you call a Puerto Rican person Mexican, they don't like that. Oh, no. I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm Mexican. I'm not a Mexican. I'm a Puerto Rican. They get pissed.
That's a thing.
That's a thing. Oh, yes, that's a thing. Don't call a Dominican a Puerto Rican. Oh, no. Oh no. Why? But why is that a thing? Like, why are you insulted that someone?
Do we know? Do we know at least the multiple choice answers?
I feel like it's a cultural pride, right? So my husband is Puerto Rican. So my family is Puerto Rican. My in-laws are Puerto Rican. My children are Puerto Rican. My stepchildren are Puerto Rican. They're very proud to be Puerto Rican. So when you, I'm going to use this word, accuse them of being another race.
Interesting.
They don't like it. And I find that horrible. I think that's terrible. I love Mexican people. If you said I was Mexican, well, I'm not. You know, I'm identify as Spanish, but that's okay because there's nothing wrong with being a Mexican.
Right.
So I'm not down with that whole like inferiority that people get when they're called something else. I think that's terrible.
Are you bilingual?
No, I wish I was.
You're not bilingual.
No, I can get by.
See, that's an assumption that I went ahead and just made.
Yeah.
See, I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
I went ahead and just made that assumption that even if you're not fluent, you know something else.
I do know something.
I know like this much of Spanish.
Sure.
Like
I can get by. I and my family would say that you speak a lot more Spanish than you know, but then I admit to. I don't feel comfortable saying that I'm bilingual, but I think if I was somewhere that
if you were stranded in New Mexico,
I would be able to
okay,
get by.
if I was stranded in New Mexico in 30 days, I'd still be in the same location. I wouldn't know how to tell which way to go. It's funny because I was just talking yesterday. My door handle broke. My door handle broke like a few days ago. And we've been so busy with school, I haven't had time to go and get it fixed. So, yeah, my door handle broke, y'all. So, I'm stuck outside of it broke a few days ago, but I locked myself out of my car twice yesterday. First time I had to pay for a locksmith.
Oh,
Boom,
God.
unnecessary money. Then I do it again late last night. But the first time I did it outside of Fuji's restaurant. And there's his, I'm going to just say this Hispanic man out there. And,
fair.
you know, safe to say not knowing what he identifies as. And I was trying to communicate with him. I know, I know a little bit of Spanish, but I don't know enough to just communicate the way I would like to. But I got my point across, and he understood what I was saying to him. And he was like, he couldn't help me, but I could call the cops, and they could. But he told me that, which is very helpful information, that cops normally help people get into their locked cars after I had already called the locksmith.
Oh.
But that was just a small example of, man, if I would have known, because I took Spanish for 2 years in undergrad, and I took Spanish for 2 years and don't have 2 years to show for it. I have maybe 6 months to show for it, but I don't have the 2 years. It didn't stick because other things are going on. If Spanish was my major, then maybe I would know a little bit more, you know. So that's unfortunate, but yeah, I thought that was funny to bring up. But you're not bilingual though.
Nope, not bilingual. Wish I was.
Yep.
But I'm not.
Do you find it hard?
Not being bilingual?
Do you find it hard? Because I'm sure you heard other languages, right? So why do you not think that you went ahead and went all the way with bilingual? Is it because it's something you never focused on?
I did. I never focused on it.
Okay. I didn't know if it was just because it was difficult, but I guess as a child, like that's the easiest time they say to teach things to people. So you could have soaked that up like a sponge if you so chose to. Okay. Did you grow up in Las Vegas around I know you said like later on you've been around a lot of different colors and different people. Was it like this as a child in your childhood?
Yes. So I grew up until I was 11 in Russellville, Arkansas. So that's white as you can. I don't want to say white as you can get, but it's just white. So no, I really wasn't exposed to a lot of different races. In fact, I remember always feeling like I was other in my school and when I grew up in Russellville. My sisters don't look like me. They're blonde hair, blue eye, light skin. And so for
all of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So I obviously have dark hair and a little bit of darker skin. So I don't look like your typical quote unquote white girl. And yeah, so a lot of times people ask my mom, was I adopted? Was I a family friend? Like,
Is your mother darker than you are?
No. She's lighter skinned. She has dark hair, but she's lighter skinned. I got my color from my dad.
Why would people ask that then?
Because people are rude.
Ah.
People are rude and people are disrespectful. And so, that happened a lot. So I really had the experience of feeling other when I lived here in Russell. But when I went to Las Vegas, I went to an inner city school. I mean, I lived in what I am okay to call a hood. and it was a Hispanic hood, but right across the street was an African American hood, and so
What makes something, by Ashley's definition,
Sure.
what makes something a hood?
we always get afraid to say those words, right? I'm very careful about that these days, but if it's from my perspective, I don't feel like I need to be careful. So where I lived was it was ghetto. I mean, it was low income. There was a lot of crime. There was a lot of, sex, drugs, and gangs, and that sort of thing. So it was full of people struggling. And that's what I would consider a hood. I don't feel like that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but that's just what my definition.
It's the reality.
It's reality. It is.
Reality.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can make all the pretty words in the world, but when you tell somebody you're from a hood, there's that universal realization of, okay, you grew up and it wasn't a great area.
Yeah. So I grew up in West Helena, Arkansas, and there's a lot of people in Conway, the Little Rock area, who are from this town. And I attended a high school that was, and again, when you're talking to, and especially with the climate we're living in right now, right? More times than not, it's normally the so-called white people who are having to explain how they did not grow up in a very diverse area, or how they grew up middle class or something like that, and how they should probably go the extra mile of wanting to be, inclusive or inclusive with other people and other demographics of people. But we have to make sure, as those who don't identify as so-called white, to make sure that we don't fall into that same category. And I'm guilty of that. And that's something more recently that I just realized. I'm 26 and I'm just realizing that, oh snap, I also grew up in a high school that was easily 95, 96% plus African American. Yo, I don't have very much diverse experience either myself. So when I grew up in West Helena, this is pretty much all I'm seeing. And there were so-called white people that lived, a lot of them, that lived in West Helena, but they attended a complete separate school. And it's something that I never really thought about very much until later. And I was like, oh, it was kind of like segregated. Like when you think about it.
Right.
Because I know it was a lot of students that went over there, but their school, not only like our school was the public school that was on the main road, main strip. Their school was like off in the cut somewhere back there in the woods. And it's like, oh snap, I guess they don't identify with us as, people of the community within West Helena, Arkansas. I don't know, but I know I never saw them. Interesting. So, it wasn't until I moved to Conway in 2013 and I didn't start college until 2015. And when I started college in 2015, I was like, I came here and immediately I just saw like interracial dating on a whole new level for Demetrius. Initially, this is what I saw because I'm coming from West Helena, which is very small compared to Conway. Like Conway is maybe 4 or 5 times the size of West Helena. So I come here and I'm attending. Well, I went to the community college in Moulton first, and then I ended up going to UCA here in Conway. And every other place I looked on the college level, maybe a little bit later, down the line a little bit older, because I guess college you can be any age, but people's in their 20s. I even saw maybe just a few people, not as many, in their 40s and up, and even some high school students who I saw a lot of interracial dating. But it wasn't until I was here 3 years. It took me maybe 2 or 3 years before I realized, in my humble opinion, well, I probably shouldn't say humble, my opinion, that interracial dating wasn't where I thought it was.
Right.
It was just big in comparison to where I was coming from. And interracial dating is such a very sensitive topic, and we all know this, we all understand this, but it's sensitive for different people for different reasons.
Sure.
And before we get into your story, I'm going to just share with you just a little bit real fast about some things that I've experienced. So I know, for example, and again, I can't speak for an entire demographic of people. I'm going to let each individual person speak for themselves. But from my experiences, I know when it comes to interracial dating, if you're a so-called black man or you're a so-called African American man, and I know my experience better than anybody, right? and you go off to college, you're educated, and you read books, and you're focused and you're goal oriented. And if you even dare step outside of your so-called race or what you so-called identify as, and you were to date preferably a white girl, you will be seen a certain way.
Oh, yes.
You will be seen a certain way, a sellout, a coon, a product of self-hate, which in a lot of scenarios, it is a lot of times self-hate does play a part in it, especially or in particular with my people.
Wait a minute. You feel like self-hate plays a part in an African-American man dating a white woman?
Absolutely.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that.
Okay. And it can play a part, and I think you may have put it that way. It can play a part. The problem, I think, in my opinion, and of course, a lot of people who know me will probably say, well, of course, Demetrius will say this. I think that it's subjective. It's not always the case. Like, it's not an automatic thing. It can be subjective, but I know from experiences, so-called black women don't like it when the brothers date outside of the race. It's a really big thing, and I get it. I understand it. I'm not necessarily against I get the idea of why they believe this, which is a lot of times, not all the time, stereotypically speaking, it's already the stereotype, but it's not as we not, I want to say learned, because we probably already knew this prior to the Clinton School, but something we just recently went over, which is from the TED Talk we watched the other day.
Yes.
She said that the problem with stereotypes is that not that they are untrue, which is bad enough in its own right, but stereotypes are incomplete.
Yes. Sure.
So, not speaking for an entire group of people, I just want to make sure I keep repeating that. But I didn't grow up without a father. I grew up without a father. And I know a lot of people who grew up without fathers. But that falls into a ton of group of people, right? A lot of people don't grow up without a lot of people grow up without their father in their life or a father figure. And so we're raised by these women, and the idea behind it is, how dare you? Your entire life, you are raised. You watch this so-called black woman, which is your mother, figuratively speaking or metaphorically speaking, break her back to take care of you, go the extra mile to take care of you, be the mother and the father, again, figuratively speaking, in your life, because your father wasn't there. You didn't have a father figure. You watched your mother work 2 or 3 jobs and work extra hard. She's the reason you're here. She could have aborted you. You're the reason. She's the reason you're here. She could have given you up for adoption. No, she chose to take care of you. You're gonna thank her by getting older and then going and dating someone or marrying someone that looks nothing like her. That's a slap in your mother's face. You're saying to her, I love you, but I don't want anything to do with you. Mm-hmm. It's almost that perspective. It's almost a mindset like that. So I hate it. Because it's like, I understand both sides, but what do you do? What do you say when you are attracted to all women as a man, regardless of where you're from? You're attracted to all women, and it just happened to be that so-called white girls fall into this category as well, because it's really the case with any demographic of people, but definitely so-called white girls, because of the relationship between whites and blacks, the relationship history. And the reason why it dates to self-hate is because it's like what I just explained. You don't want anything that looks like you. So here you go dating outside of your race because you're supposed to feel better. Here you go dating outside of your race because it's supposed to give you like some type of social boost. When, again, that is the case. Actually, that's actually the case. It really is the case for a ton of people. It is related to self-hate with some people. The problem is, and it's very, 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 very hard to get your own people to understand this, it's not always the case. It's not always the case. Because that's the case if you're only dating that group of people and you won't step out. But what if you're versatile, if you will? Mm-hmm. What if you're open to any and everyone, or any and every woman regardless of what she looks like, because you're solely focused on the person. Well, you have those people who believe these or feel these certain ways, stick to their guns. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm. So do I hear you saying that when you're describing self-hate, you're talking about the person who chooses specifically, I am going to date white women for whatever reason. And I'm not going to step out. Like, I'm not going to date I'm not interested in dating an African-American woman. It's not about who I'm naturally attracted to, but more about, I want to stay within this race. You're saying that's what would be self-hate, but just an African-American male just being attracted to whoever he's attracted to. He's not limiting himself to one race. That's not self-hate.
Correct.
Okay.
The problem, though, is you have, and like anything else, you have people who make their own, not just their own assumptions, essentially. You have people who make their own definitions.
Yeah.
So they're going to call self-hate not what you just broke down so eloquently. No, they're going to call self-hate simply, I don't care if it's your preference or not, Demetrius, or whoever the so-called black man is. I don't care if it's your preference. I don't care if you date I don't care if you do date black girls too, Hispanic girls too, Mexican girls too. I don't care if you do date a Filipino. It don't matter. The fact that you're also dating them and you're posting it on social media or you're talking about how much you love this person, the reason why it's self-hate, Demetrius, and you won't ever get it is because you don't even realize it.
That's just a terrible thing.
What do you say to somebody like that?
I'm so glad you brought this up because this happened to me. It has happened. What you are talking about has happened to me. So that's why I have such a visceral reaction to this. Because for me, when you ask me, what do you say to that? You don't say anything. You just don't say anything. And I'm sorry if I'm getting a little angry.
No, go for it.
You don't. The point is, I love somebody. I don't give a shit what their skin looks like. I love you, Mom. I love you not because you're African American. I love you because you worked your ass off to support me and you are a mother and a father. I love you because of your heart, because of your brain, because of the sacrifice that you made for me. It has nothing to do with your skin color. I'm not going to love a woman or a man because of their skin color. I'm going to love them because of who they are as a human being, which is why I love you. And so I feel so bad for anybody who's put into that box to have to explain why they love somebody who's a different color. I should not have to do that. You should not have to do that. Nobody should have to do that.
I agree with you. So you have experiences with interracial dating.
I'd love to share that with you. I've like I said, I've dated, outside of what I would consider my race. And a lot of people may look at me and associate me with being Caucasian. And that's fine. I'm not mad about that. I understand that assumption. What you're discussing, this self-hate, I experienced at such a horrible level. And it really traumatized my life, Dimitri. I mean, it really did. My 12-year-old son's father is African American. His family lives in Shreveport, Louisiana. His parents are pastors at an all-black church. They live in an all-black community. They always have. His parents have been married for 50 years. They're, of course, both African Americans. Good people, but that's their life. That's their culture. Yep. That's how they choose to live, which is fine. I'm not mad at anybody for that. I don't think they said, I'm going to move to this town specifically because it's majority African American. It's just how it worked out. I met him in college. We fell in love with each other. Had nothing to do with skin or anything else. And I got pregnant. I accidentally got pregnant. Okay. It wasn't a planned scenario. We were both 21. We were in college. I had never met his parents, but he was a football player. And so this is when we barely found out we were pregnant. His parents always came to the games. And after that game, he had planned on introducing me to his parents, right? So there was this whole build up to this. I was so excited. I was in love with this man. I loved him so much. And I believe he loved me. I really did. I mean, we really had a very positive and loving relationship. So I went to that game. I wore a shirt that had his number on it and his last name. I was so proud of him.
Wow.
And I remember after the game waiting around underneath the bleachers, which is where we had decided we would meet, right? So I could be introduced to his parents. I'm so nervous. Like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. Like, I hope to marry this man. Like, you know, this is just a big deal. Of course, I was pregnant with his child. Like, okay, this is going to be good. He never showed up. And I waited and I waited. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? This is not like him. Like, this is not like him not to show up. This was maybe around 9:30 that we were expected to meet. And I don't get a call from him
at night,
right after a Friday night football game.
Okay.
So I don't get a call from him until midnight, and I have no idea what's happening. He calls me to tell me that his parents saw, you know, that I had his number on and stuff. So this was obviously the person he was dating, and they flipped their shit. They gave him a speech about how in the Bible, Abraham dated a white woman. Now, maybe I'm saying the wrong person. It may have been another name, but there was a person in the Bible who dated a white woman, and that white woman took away all of his power and depleted him of who he was as a man. They told him that because I was Hispanic, that I would take him out into the desert and get him strung out on drugs and he would lose his scholarship. They told him that he basically was insulting his family because he was with me, and that if he stayed with me, he would basically be left with nothing and would no longer be a man. They used the Bible to tell him this. And here I am, 21 years old. I'm just in love. And I'm like, oh my God, these people hate me at a basic level without even knowing me at all, without even saying hi, listening to me speak, asking me a question. They judged me based on how I looked, and that is it. And they made him feel like a piece of trash for dating me. It went on and on throughout my pregnancy. When he finally told them, they refused to meet me. They absolutely refused to meet me, said they weren't going to do it. They even said that they had went to his house earlier that day and saw my hair in the sink and knew that I had quote unquote white people hair. So knew that he was dating a white person. So I imagine them sitting in the stands spewing over this inside, knowing that their strong African-American son was dating a white woman, and how terrible that was. There was this whole buildup. I thought to myself, really? They took my hair out of the sink so they could talk about the fact that I had white people hair? What are we even talking about here? So they refused to meet me my whole pregnancy. When he told them that they were having a boy, she said, we're not having a boy. That's not my grandson. That killed me. That killed him. I mean, it did. He was close to it. His parents were the parents. They were at every football game. They raised him to be a good man. They took him to church every Sunday. He loved his parents. They were so involved. But his first child, their first grandson, they wanted nothing to do with him because I was white. They didn't come to the baby shower. They didn't come to his birth. In fact, they didn't even meet him until after they forced me to have a paternity test. Because I guess because I was white, I don't know, I was also a slut. And they, you know, I was trying to trap Arthur. Excuse me. I was trying to trap him to be with me because I got pregnant. That was my whole goal, to trap him to the relationship, because that's all that white women do, or a majority of white women do that. They didn't meet my son until after he was a month old. And I had to go to their house and pretend like they didn't treat me, because I loved this man. I wanted this relationship. I wanted this family. And he did too. And I'll never forget walking into their house and knowing that these people hated my guts because I was white, and just completely rejected their grandchild. And I had to walk in and act like everything was okay.
It didn't matter the type of person you were.
They gave me no chance to even prove that at all. They never spoke a word. They never said hello to me. They never even asked him a question about me. They saw how I looked. They saw that I was not African American, and they made their judgment then and there, and they kept with it.
See, I think this right here that breaks my heart to hear that. This right here is what I mean when I say it's dangerous, because to my people in particular, I understand us, right? I understand it's dangerous, and I'm not here because I get it. Like this, I already have this perception of being like this guy that want to bridge people together, not just like different races, you know, quote unquote, but just if you standing over there and you think something's tall, and you're standing over there and you think it's short, I want to get y'all in the middle so we can just agree that it's probably a little bit of both. But I can't. That won't always happen. And when I was running for diversity chair, a couple of weeks ago, that's something I said in my pitch vid. I was basically saying that I've always been that guy since high school of trying to like bid people together, and it can backfire. It can backfire trying to be that person all the time. And I think that's extremely dangerous when you talk about a group of people, you know, being my people who has a history, right? Our ancestors has a history of oppression and redlining and systemic racism. These things are real.
Yes.
These are things that are actually happening.
I agree.
That has actually happened for sure. Evil, truly evil. But I think the danger comes in when our flip side to that is, well, not only do we not want, and it's not all of us, but there are some of us where it's like it's not all of us, but we're gonna look at these people and we're gonna completely flip it and say, well, actually, you're the devil, or actually, you're evil by default.
Yeah.
By default, I don't care what you look. I don't care the type of person you are. I don't care how you grew up. I don't care about your experiences. I don't care about what religion you are. I don't care if you're spiritual. I don't care. I don't care if you've dated black people or if you've dated this group of people. You look like that. So no matter what you say, no matter how you try to convince me,
I'm automatically going to have that assumption.
You can't flip it like that. That's dangerous.
I was just about to say that. I think that's dangerous. If African American people have been treated as less than forever.
Right.
You can go back as far as you want, and they're still treated as less than. That's a problem for me. Speaking
of, as of yesterday, none of the cops that killed Breonna Taylor or played a role in killing Breonna Taylor were actually charged for murder. Two of the cops got off. One of the cops was charged with, I forget the name of it, but essentially it's equivalent to a DWI. He could do 5 years total, but if he has a very good lawyer, he could do 1.5 years probation at best.
Less than. This woman was sleeping in her bed with her fiance,
right, and
she was murdered in cold blood.
Yep.
That's less than, because if she was a white woman, this would have been a whole different scenario.
It wouldn't have even taken this long.
No. So I definitely I agree with you there. But my problem, and I agree with what you're saying, is if you've been treated as less than, help us learn from that and don't treat somebody else like they're less than. And that means for anybody.
Yeah.
Anyone. They made me feel like I was less than. No, they didn't. I was less than to them. They would come to the games. They would sit over in the other side of the stadium. They would see me with my pregnant belly, and they would walk right past me like I wasn't even there. And let me tell you, Demetrius, the first time I went to their house, I asked this pastor, this preacher, this man who had been in the pulpit for 20 years, why did you treat me like that? That really hurt my feelings. Why did you treat me like that? And let me tell you what he told me. First, he got his Bible out and told me that white people are basically the scourge on this earth, that we were a mistake, right? So on Noah's Ark, it was Noah's, I hope I get the story right. It's been quite some time, and honestly, it was quite traumatic, so I probably blocked a lot of it out. But essentially, somebody on Noah's Ark cheated on their wife, and the punishment for that was a white baby being born. So maybe you can take that another way, but the way that I took that was white people are basically a punishment for this earth. So that's
I've heard that.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that shit's crazy.
Yeah.
So then he went on to say, okay, Ashley, imagine this. Imagine my wife goes And he's talking to me like this, and I'm sitting there like, what is he going to say? Like, please don't say anything crazy. Like, I need to love this man. He is a father of the person I love. He is the grandfather of my son. My son's name is Arthur Douglas IV. He is the 4th generation of the Douglases. I mean, I need to like him. I want to. He told me, imagine my wife going into the kitchen and making these homemade, delicious oatmeal cookies. She spends all this time making these cookies from scratch with care, with love. And she gets them out of the oven and they're cooling off and the house is smelling or filling with this delicious smell of these cookies. And she goes to the backyard and she gets the trash can lid off of the dumpster. And she carries the trash can lid in and she puts these homemade delicious cookies on top of the trash can lid and then serves them to you. That's how our meeting was. How would you take that? How would you take that? Was I the trash can? Was I the cookies? What
right,
the
and regardless the answer,
it's wrong.
Who would want to have anything to do with that analogy, right?
It just wasn't right.
This pastor, something I've said many times in the past, when I've said it's meant for anybody, but in particular in response to certain things that's happened. When I've said this before in the past, and I've stood by and I stand by it, as I've said, and it's gotten quite the reaction every time I say it on social media, which is you can't be religious and racist.
No.
You can't be spiritual and racist. And in particular, when I was saying, I was like, you have these in particular, again, and I'm going to explain this. You have these Caucasian pastors, again, not all of them. A lot of them definitely does not fall into this category. But I'm saying this is a thing that's been a thing in the past. Well, you have like in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s, you have these preachers who are racist, but they're going to go to church and they're going to preach these certain things. But when they're leaving, they're putting on KKK hoods and doing these, who? That makes no sense.
Right.
But it doesn't just fall there, which that's enough in its own. Like it gets the point across. But that falls for any other category, any other group of people too.
Yes.
You can't. I don't care if you're a black man. I don't care if you're Hispanic. I don't care if you're anything like Asian. It don't matter what you are. You can't be spiritual and racist.
I agree.
And we try to make this. It's like this disconnect. We can be this, but we're gonna put this feeling and this thought way over here.
No.
So they have nothing to do with one another.
That's so dangerous. I think that's so dangerous. I think religion is like this way to make anybody believe anything.
Yep.
And if you
it's a tool.
It's a tool. And if you are someone, I don't care what color you are, you're a leader of a church, the things that you say matter. The things that you say shape your congregation. How they view it shapes their worldview because they trust you. You are their spiritual advisor. Like you are their connection to the man upstairs.
Yep, you are the deliverer. You helping like almost transport their soul from this one place to where it should be.
What's more important than that for a lot of people?
There isn't.
So it's dangerous. It is dangerous.
When I first moved here and I saw these interracial couples, I thought it was dope. And again, it wasn't until I was here maybe 2 or 3 years and I realized it's still a thing here, but this place is completely way, 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 way bigger than West Helena. So, of course, the chances of interracial dating, it's a college town.
Yeah.
It's going to be more. But something I realized, Ashley, and this is really we're getting into the juice of it, the meat and potatoes, as people say, is I started to realize that not only is it not where it should be, but I think we're a long ways from where we should be. And I'm going to explain to you why. Interracial dating is definitely a thing. And I mean this with all due respect to you, because your experience just happens to fall into this category. But not all the time, but majority of the time, my experience that I've seen at this kind, it could be different all over the country, all over the world, rather. But definitely all over nationally. When I see an interracial couple, 9 times out of 10, it's athletes. It just happened to work like that. Cheerleader, athlete, or
Okay.
or and the ones that don't fall into that category probably have something, some type of spiritual or religious connection in church, or some type of religious group, branched out from the university. And you have your miscellaneous, so you have those that don't fall into any of those categories. Now, something I noticed, because when I first moved here, once again, I want to say this again, I saw these interracial couples. I loved it. I know a lot of people back home who wouldn't love it. I know a lot of people at home who would say that, of course, Demetrius will love it, because I remember, and I've mentioned this, and I know you all are gonna, any of you who's been listening to the podcast so far, and I appreciate all the support, by the way. You pretty much know what I'm about to bring up, because I've mentioned this 2 or 3 times already in just the 2 or 3 episodes I've released. But right before I graduated high school, I remember sitting in the living room. I remember the street. I remember the house I was living in. And I remember my aunt telling me, this is the second time I had ever heard this. My aunt was like, my nickname's Didi. And she was like, oh, they was like, bragging on me because I was really big on art. Mm-hmm. But I was, in the fight, if you will, to graduate number 1 male in my class.
Sure.
So I was like I was competing on these different levels, and I was playing sports and doing all these different things. And she was like, well, I'm telling y'all what Didi gonna do right now. He not finna leave off and go play sports. Didi's gone, I'm telling you, he's gonna leave. Y'all playing with him. He's gonna leave off, go to college, get a good job, marry him a white woman, and start a family. And she saw nothing wrong with it. Wait, Ashley.
I know.
Nothing was wrong with it. She said this as a compliment.
But why is that a compliment?
This was a compliment to Demetrius. This was supposed to say Demetrius is going to go off and be successful.
Yeah,
and
but
being successful is part of that image, right? And part of that imagery is marrying a white woman.
That's wrong. It shouldn't be that way. If that is the reality, it shouldn't be the reality. A white wife is not a trophy.
She said this, and I looked at her, and I didn't quite understand why that's the perception of me. And I'm like, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
I talk a certain way, and I don't fall into the category of talking quote unquote hood. Sure. Right? I talk like I have some sense. I do use slang. I know how to flip in and out of that talk. But there's no such thing as talking white. And I know this is a big thing in my community where we say he talks white. And I've heard this since I've attended and graduated college, and I go back home and little kids and say he talks funny. Mm-hmm. He talks white, like a white person. There's no such thing as talking like a white person, because what we're doing right there is, once again, we're putting whiteness with we're equivalating whiteness with success. That's not a that doesn't make sense. We're equivalating whiteness with education. Again, that does not make sense. I get the idea. I understand why we as people, my people in particular, why we think and feel this way. There are many, many different people who classify as white that aren't even educated. There are many, many so-called white people who are not only not educated, but they talk like a so-called black person. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing as talking like a so-called black person. Mm-hmm. Like, I get it. That it just so happened that a larger, percentage of this group of people talk a certain way. But that does not mean that goes with their so-called race or their nationality. So because I think this is, and the reason why I bring this up is because I talk the way I talk educated, and I talk like I have some sense. They're like, oh, if Didi talk more quote unquote hood, which is more acceptable, and he was going to college, all right, maybe I say he's going to go off and marry him a woman. But because Didi talks the way he talks and he carries himself the way he carries himself, he's going to go off and marry a white woman.
How does that make you feel?
I've never dated a white girl in my life. I've quote unquote talked to, and I don't know. There's different classifications, and people understand it to be different things. That just means like some people call it dating.
Sure.
But dating for me, it means you're legit my girlfriend.
Okay.
So if you classify dating as the phase you do before you get married or something like that, all right, then you can call it dating. I have dated a white girl, but when she said this, I just stared at her, because Ashley, I was like, oh, I'm 16 at the time. Oh, okay. This is the second time I've heard this in my life. And it just so happened that many, many years before the first time I had heard it. came from the same person. Why did you just say that? And she goes, oh, because you have so much going for yourself, you're going to graduate, you're going to get a good job. Oh, she don't even realize I'm not even talking about the college part. She don't even know I'm talking about the marrying a white woman part.
Right.
Why do you just assume that's going to happen for me? Oh, I don't know, Didi. I don't know, baby. Don't think too much into it. I am going to think too much into it.
Because she planted that seed. And that's just the same on the flip side when you're a white woman. So I talked about my experience coming from his family, but I've had that same experience coming from my white friends or my white side of the family. You're not going to go into the black world. You're not going to that college party to go into the black world.
Let's be honest here. Let's have this conversation.
Yeah. That was a thing that has happened to me so many times. And I always remember thinking, what the hell are you talking about? What's a black world? You mean the United States of America that is mixed of a whole bunch of different people? What's the white world? I don't live in that world. I just live in the world. So I'm not going into anything. I've been called the N-word lover more times than I can count on my hands.
You've heard this?
I've been called that so many times.
What? Listen, all right. Let's please. This is what I've been waiting on. I've been wanting people to come here and have this conversation. I want to sit down with a KKK member. I want to do this.
I know, and that's why I offered myself.
I wanted this.
Yeah.
What does it mean when that's said? Like,
so
I'm trying to understand what the N-word means in German. This is a word that I knocked out of my vocabulary.
Me too.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
I stopped saying this years ago. Because I get there's this consensus, and by the way, I'm not saying this because I'm on here with Ashley. I've said this with Chris James, who identifies as an African American. I've said this with my brothers and my sisters who sat on this podcast as well. So it's not because I'm on here with Miss Ashley. I'm only saying this. This is a legit thing that I've said several times before. We have this thing where us as so-called black people, we say that we've taken this N-word and we flipped it. And we've made it cool because we set the trends. I do believe, and I'm just being honest.
I get that.
I believe that we, as in like so-called black people, I think we do set trends that a lot of people follow. But
agree.
other cultures do that as well. But I think ours can be like extremely powerful. And because of this, I think people try to associate that with things like the N-word and said like, oh, we flipped it and made it into something cool. No, we did not. This is just my opinion. What I think happened is, and again, this is also something I said on the podcast already. What I think happened is, like, if I was to say, Ashley, repeat me. The gangster walked down the street.
The gangster walked down the street.
Say it again.
The gangster walked down the street.
Okay. There's gangster and then there's gangsta.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's the coronavirus, and then there's the Rona. Then there's the N-word with the hard ER.
Yeah.
And then there's the N-word with the A at the end. I think what's happened is it's not that we made it cool. Yes, it's something cool to say that we say in our culture, but what I'm saying is, or in our community, what I'm saying is, I don't think we made it into something cool intentionally. I think we just talk different. I think what happened is we don't say gangster, we say gangster. We don't say little. We don't say Little Wayne. We say Lil Wayne. Right? We give it like a cutoff. So I think that's what happened. So this is a word I cut out. But I've never, ever, ever been able to understand what it means. Like if I was to have someone come up and call me that word who's not so-called black, and they mean it with the hard ER, and they mean it in a very derogatory way, I would just look at them and be like, all right, so what I need you to do right now is tell me what that word means. Like, because if you were meaning to offend me, I'll help you offend me so that I can feel offended and you can get some joy out of it. But I don't feel a lick of offense. Like I'm not offended at all right now because I don't know what that word means. You're
lucky that you feel like that, but not everybody does. A lot of people still are very and should rightfully be offended by that word.
No. Okay, I'm glad you just said that because maybe I'm coming off a different way. If someone walked up to me and said the N-word, I understand how they're trying to offend me. I understand the history of the word. Okay. Oh, no, I get the history of the word. I get the intent behind it. What I'm saying, I'm being very psychological here. I'm saying, so the N-word means what?
That word doesn't hold any power over me.
Right, but I'm
that
going
what
to
you're
get
saying?
even more technical, and I want you to explain this to me if you've had this explained to you, because I really don't get it. So when a so-called white person who considers himself a racist was to call we'll use something you've dealt with, for you to be called the N-word lover.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You're loving on someone who's what?
Less than.
Less than. So the N-word means that you're less than.
Yeah.
Simply
you're
because
an inferior race.
Okay.
That's what they mean.
Okay.
And a person could try to make it sound pretty all they want. They could justify, or they could say things like, well, if you dated a white man, your life would be easier, right? Just like when you tell a person, if you weren't a homosexual, your life would be easier. So I don't want you to be gay because I know it's going to be more difficult. I don't want you to date a black man. I don't want you to date a white girl because your life is going to be more difficult, right? If someone tells you in that way, you're like, well, they care about me. Fuck that. No.
Right. I think this is a great segue into you talk about what's being said in communities and what the beliefs are. Something that I experienced since I've been here is, and again, this is on the front of my podcast. If you look there, and it's the bottom left corner, it says "Real Combos Only." I'm going to be honest.
Sure.
And I expect anybody to come on here to be them. Be genuine, right? Don't say something that you just think Demetrius will agree with.
Sure.
No, just because you think it may make me uncomfortable, no. You can try me. Okay. You can't make me uncomfortable, I promise you.
I'm here for it.
Absolutely. So, something I've noticed very, very much so is, and I'm going to get flack for this, and I'm okay with it, because I'm only speaking from my experiences. What I've noticed is, you will have a lot of people who say that they're not racist. Okay, cool. Because of course you're not going to come out in the community, especially in the climate right now, unless you're just hardcore KKK
Sure.
racist. Or out, you don't have to necessarily be KKK, but just hardcore racist out and about with it. You're not going to do it, right? Especially if you might have friends who, even if they're white, who don't consider themselves racist. You don't want to be the bad guy. Like,
I get it.
Why would you come out and say that? But what I've noticed is you'll have a group of people who say that they're not racist, and they don't classify and identify, and then they'll be a part of the movement, so-called Black Lives Matter, which the Black Lives Matter movement isn't even about black people. That's a different conversation. You have people like this, but if you look at the percentages, how many of them are dating outside of the race? That's a very big pet peeve of mine, because I get it. I'm not telling you, even if you're attracted to this man or you're attracted to this woman who just happened, you're so-called white, you're attracted to this man or this woman who also happen to be so-called white, you shouldn't do that. If you're not racist, no. Think a little bit higher with me. No low-level thinking, just think with me. What I'm saying is, if the chances are, as a whole, that we are making progression in this climate, we're making progression in 2020, there's this whole movement. I would just think that dating would be, because I have an episode actually where I talk about this church that I attended and how I felt like, and I won't say the name of the church. I didn't say the name of the church in that episode either. But this church is a very prominent church, very wealthy church, and a ton of people go there. It's a very diverse church, or for the most part, it's diverse. But these people, it's like, I love you, but I love you to an extent.
Like, I love you, but I don't want my daughter dating you.
She took the words out of my mouth. I was getting there. I love you, but you can't date my son. I love you, but you can't. Now, you don't even look at my daughter. All right. I love you, brother in Christ. I love you, sister in Christ. But dating and marrying is to completely having sex with you talking about inserting your penis inside of kissing, putting your lips on. Nah, let's not get that far. I love you, but let's not get. You're not gonna have grandchildren with my.
Disgusting.
It's real, and it's a thing. And what grinds my gears is when I sit and I talk with people who talk about how we're gonna make progression, and this is how interracial communication it should be, or how this, that, and the third. But it's like, I'm not gonna pick on you. I don't want you to pick on me. But as a whole, when I look at it, what progression are we making, man? Progression speaks with actions, not words. Yep. we aren't interracially dating. We're not. It's a thing. And I was involved with this girl who is a white girl. And I was with her for like 3.5 years. And her parents knew about me. We hung out and they knew about me being her friend. She'd come over and she'd quote unquote do homework. We do homework sometimes, but we were just hanging out a lot of the times. And we'd go places and stuff. This is before she got a vehicle, before I had a vehicle. Then we both got vehicles and we definitely did stuff together. But they have a lake house. I was never dated. I was never like invited out to the lake house. Lake house, I think, is like an hour outside of Conway. I was never invited out there. Okay. But I'm her friend though. And it got to a point to where I never thought of it that way because, we were getting to know each other and I truly get to know women. I don't just jump into relationships and date, and it's not about sex for me. And eventually I started to get this mindset, Ashley, and I was like, yo, I probably shouldn't say it this way, but it's almost like everything we're doing is in secret. Like we're hanging out, but it's at my apartment. Like we don't really go out much, and anytime we're kissing, we're kind of in my apartment when we're kissing. Yo, I think it's time for you to tell your folks about us. It was a big deal. She didn't want to do it. So, and something I had asked her several times before was, do you think your parents are racist? And this is before this conversation had come up, Ashley, and she would tell me, well, when you say racist, anytime you got to start off that way, it's not looking good. She would say, well, they've never really said racist things to me. But they've kind of always loved my friends. Like I didn't meet a black person to a certain extent. And, they know I have black friends now and they love all my black friends. Right. But racism isn't just that, right? It's a little bit more than that.
It's a subconscious racism.
Like it's not just about you having black friends. Like there's different sections. Like you can go to the friend section, you can go to the dating section, you can go to the going out to parties, hanging out at their house section. When I went to this church, nobody ever invited me to their house. And they invited each other to their house all the time. I was never invited. Yo, I'm nice. I'm intelligent.
Yeah.
I'm cool.
Fun to be around.
Right. Like I'm pretty much good at everything you all are good at. I get along with everybody.
Why am I not being invited to a Sunday brunch?
Right. So she eventually told her parents, Ashley, and it was the end of us. She told them, everything flipped out. To this day, I still don't think she ever told me everything that was said to her when she finally broke the news. But she wasn't allowed to come back around me. It's like, it was okay when we were friends, but after 3 years, you tell them that we're intimate. And I don't use this term loosely, love. The girl was deeply in love with me. You understand? And she's married now, by the way. But all of a sudden, when you bring up intimacy and dating and relationship, everything changes. Everything changes. Yeah. I can't see your mom anymore. I still hadn't seen her yet. That was eye-opening, but it wasn't news. It just hurt because it's different when you have that camaraderie, you have that relationship and that experience with that person, right? So I can relate to you in your experience, because that was heartbreaking for me. And when I moved to Conway, something I noticed very, very much so, again, is that interracial dating isn't a thing. I hit on a ton of women. My close knit friends know me this way. They actually have. I've been accused of being, I use the word accused very, very carefully, of being probably the most outgoing person they know. They say, Demetrius is the type, Demetrius, like, I'll go up and I'll hit on a lady in a very respectful manner and ask for a number, ask her out. Hit on may sound too aggressive. I'll go out and approach a woman and ask her out or something. But the scenario has to be right. The mood has to be right. Demetrius is the type, if he's in a grocery store, and I mean not just in the grocery store, but if he's rushing, like he has somewhere to be, he's running in and running back out, and he sees somebody He's going to stop, think of some clever way to get her attention, be extremely respectful, and do it. So with that being said, Ashley, I've hit on a ton of women in my life, and a great deal of them have been Caucasian women, and none of them have amounted to anything. Now, if you say, well, just maybe you weren't the person for them.
No.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's all it is.
Right. Maybe they were in a situation. Absolutely. These are chances. I probably shouldn't say this. I don't know the number, but I've hit over 100. I've hit on hundreds of women in my life.
Sure.
I know that's a lot of people, but I'm not kidding. I think I'm a decent looking guy. I think I take care of my hygiene very well. I'm very well spoken. I'm a people's person. I'm very conscientious. So I'm aware of like the surroundings and the environment. I'm not going to approach you at nighttime in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Catch you by your car. Like, hey, this is creepy. And I have this hoodie on and I don't want you to be creepy, but I really think you're pretty. If you're not in a relationship, can I get a coffee with you sometime?
Right.
No, I'm smart about this. The fact that none of them have amounted to anything, and I'm not going to toot my own horn and say I'm the best at hitting on women or I got my words together and I'm great with words. No, I'm enough to get my point across. None of them.
But it makes you wonder, right? Like,
why?
And we know why, right? We can say that on this podcast. We live in Arkansas. A young black man is probably going to amount to nothing, right?
Right.
I can't take this black man home to my family, to my white mama and daddy. They're going to be ashamed of me. Right. I'll be an outcast.
And the fact that that's still a belief in 2020 is mind-blowing to me. And
it's a problem. It's wrong. Let's say that. I think it's important.
Let's say that. There it is.
It is wrong. You cannot say that you are not there's a myriad of ways that you could prove that you're not racist. But I think for the context of this conversation, you cannot say that you are not racist if you do not allow your children to date outside of their race. But let me say this. The same goes for an African American.
Absolutely.
If you, as an African American mom or dad, are discouraging your children from dating outside of the African American race, I think that's racist too. I do. I think you could be racist against anybody.
And it's funny you worded it like that, and I have a feeling you worded it like that because, and maybe or maybe not, you've heard this, Ashley, but I've heard that if you're so-called black, you can't be racist. It's impossible.
I think that's a definite perception. Yeah.
Have you heard this? I've heard that if you're so-called black, you can't be racist because by definition, so-called white people are the reason why the racist term is what it is. Mm-hmm. And this is something I talked about in my group with Elizabeth them at the Clinton School because I didn't know that. I told them in the group, I said, I've never heard that. It was like, yeah, Demetrius, we're three, because it was her, Beth, and Claire. And they were saying like, oh, I joined the group late. And they were all like, what are y'all talking about? And she told me, and she was like, yeah, so we kind of needed you because we're all three middle class white girls and we don't really have many differences when it comes to that. And by definition, like, you can't be racist because, white people, created it and they're the reason for it. And I was like, that's interesting. And I'm not going to speak on that because that's the first time I've heard that before. But it's interesting. And interesting is, like I said before, that's normally a replacement word for people. People say something's interesting when they don't like it. Right. People say something's interesting when they don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Mm-hmm. But you can also use the word interesting when you really find it interesting. And I truly find that interesting because I've never heard that perspective before. And I have to do a little bit more research, Does
it matter where it was created? I don't feel like it matters. I mean, well, okay, let me take that back. I'm not going to take anything away from anybody. How the origin of something is important, absolutely. We need to understand where that origin is from. But if we're talking about today and we're talking about change for tomorrow, we're talking about learning from past so the present can be, or so the present can be different, so the future can be different. We have to acknowledge where we are right now.
Absolutely.
And part of racism is this circle that everybody is in. Whether you're racist against white people or white people racist against black people, or hell, Puerto Ricans are racist against their own race. Can I tell you that? My mother-in-law is a light-skinned Puerto Rican woman. My father-in-law is a dark-skinned Puerto
Wait,
Rican.
that's a thing in y'all.
That's the
community?
thing.
Yo, I didn't know that.
Listen, I'm about to blow your mind.
That's the thing in our community.
Yeah, he's not an African American. He's Puerto Rican. He was born in Puerto Rico. Now, okay, in the 1700s, Africans and Spanish, they mixed together. It created Puerto Ricans. But for all intents and purposes, he's not African American. He's Puerto Rican.
All right.
They were both born and bred in Puerto Rico. His family born and bred in Puerto Rico. But when she told her family that she was dating this man, they were pissed. Because his skin was dark. But he's not even African American. He's Puerto Rican. He's not even a different culture. He's not a different race. Nothing. His skin is just darker. So you can be racist against your own race, against your own country. The bottom line is, if you don't like somebody else based on the color of their skin, if you cannot love them based on the color of their skin, if you will not encourage your daughter or your son to date someone because of the color of their skin, you're racist. That's it. That is it. That's all there is to it. We need to love each other. We need to support each other. And your mother, excuse me. Someone else's mother, an African American mother, should tell their child, honey, I want you to date someone who makes you feel good.
Absolutely.
Who will love and support you, and who you'll have a healthy relationship and a long relationship. That's what I want for you.
I agree. And for the record, it was my aunt who said it, but
Right.
also for the record, my mother has never, which has always made me feel a little sad, and it's in a weird way. It's really in a weird way. My mother's never spoken on that. She's never cared.
That's wonderful.
The young lady I was just giving you the example about, when she eventually told her parents about this, only because I put her in a position to do so, and it went sour. My mother knew about this young lady before that situation, and even after the situation, I told my mom about the situation, and my mother's different. Like, she's an amazing woman. She didn't focus on the racist part at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay even if you did, because that was, in my opinion, I don't jump to just everything's racist when something you don't like what I said and you just happen to be white, or you just happen to be something different.
Oh, God. You're racist.
It's racist. You don't like my shoes? Racism. I don't jump to racism every time. I don't do that.
Oh, Lord.
I think about what's logical, what's realistic.
Yes.
And I look at it, I make my own assessment for what it is, and I call it for what I assess it to be. Now, my mother, and if something in this particular scenario, absolutely, I'm a great person. They liked me before. The second you tell them that we're intimate,
now
everything
you're not good
changes.
enough. Yeah.
She's not allowed to come around me anymore. How dare she? And to this day, I still don't think, again, she don't tell me everything that they told her about why they were upset about it. That is related to race, and my assumption. That's what I'm going to say. And I'm going to stick with it.
That's not even an assumption. It is.
Right.
That is racist.
Right. So, boom, there's that. My mother, I told my mother about this, and she never brought up the race thing. It's okay if you do, because that's clearly what it is. My mother didn't do that. She goes, that's just really sad. Mm-hmm. I really liked her. She was a really sweet girl. And you all seem to like each other. My mama's never cared about that stuff. And I know it's cliche to say that. Listen, Demetrius is not a cliche.
That's not cliche.
I'm going to hit you with, it's a cliche. What I'm assuming is cliche, and this is probably what you're talking about, is for someone to say, we look great together, and I wish y'all could have. Now listen, I'm going to shoot it to you straight. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to say something just because I think you're going to like it. Mm-hmm. Which segues me to and this could be the last portion of the podcast. I don't want to keep you too long, Ashley. Is authenticity. People being genuine, people being honest. And this is something I've also spoke about at the Clean School. We're in this climate right now where it's almost like, it seems like they're trying to push towards a race war. That's truly how I feel. And
a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah. And I don't think people are going to be honest. You can't force anybody to be honest. So, for example, at the Clinton School, and, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, let's say out of the 40-something people in our cohort, nobody there is racist. Nobody there has any lick of racistness in them. Okay? The statistic says that is very unlikely. But let's just say that that's the case. Boom, that's the case for that. But what is the chances of being in a group of people, whether it be the Clinton School or anywhere? You have a group of 40, 50, 60 people together, trying to work towards a common goal and everything. And and I could be wrong, but I don't think the Clinton School has always started off the semester integrating all this stuff about interracial this and interracial that. They understand that they're going to have a vast different group of people coming in, but every other thing is about surveys with interracial communication. Where did this all come from?
We had a cultural humility workshop in the first week.
It's not a mistake, right? So I just wonder, Ashley, and I love your take on this. How genuine do you think that people are, including yourself? How genuine do you think people are? Because if someone's a racist, right, or don't classify themselves as a racist, I don't want to use that word loosely. If someone is somebody who has racist beliefs, probably not their fault, probably what they grew up around. So probably they definitely grew up around it, and it's probably affected them in some ways here and there. So they believe a certain way, but everything's going on around them, and everything is saying you shouldn't think this way, and this is wrong, this, that, and the third. You're not going to come out and say, I believe this way. More than likely. So I just wonder how honest everyone is being, not just at the Clinton School, in this climate altogether.
Yeah.
Because everybody want to share this stuff about Black Lives Matter or say nothing about it. But just because you're sharing it don't mean you feel it.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. I think there's a place to start, though, right? So white silence is a problem. I think that's a real problem. And so I think... we shouldn't take anything away from a white person who's never stood up or said anything, posting an image on their Facebook of Black Lives Matter or all the hands, holding each other. I think that's a step in the right direction. And I appreciate those steps in the right directions. But what I think that we have to do as Americans, as people who live in this nation, whatever color we are, I think micro racism is a real thing. And I think it's our responsibility as human beings to call those things out.
Micro-racism.
So we learned about that in class, right? The little things that people say, right? The little comments, Black people are always late. Black people love fried chicken. The little dumb shit that people say. Right. White girls love frappuccinos, whatever. We've all heard those stereotypes before. But calling those things out is important. And I think that's where we could make the first step. But also not being afraid to stand with other people. So like when you posted yesterday in the group chat about your outrage over Breonna Taylor, it's horrible. And I remember thinking to myself, I obviously think that's terrible. It's fucking ridiculous. But, excuse my French, but I sit there thinking like, God, what is the right thing for me to say? Like, I don't identify as African American. I don't want to say so, like, I don't want to sound pretentious. Like, how do I be there for him, for anybody in our cohort that identifies as African American that feels like, what do I say? And I almost didn't post something.
And that could be taken the wrong way.
Right, but
it's coming from a place.
I made myself uncomfortable and I just said, I'm here, I'll stand with you, whatever you need. And I feel like that's the first step. Being able to get out of that uncomfortable feeling of like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And just saying, listen, this is wrong. I agree. And I want you to know that I believe this is wrong. And I'm here to try to help if I can. And I think that's where we begin. We have to change these perceptions that we have in our minds. I remember my mom dated an African American man. She told me this story on the way over here. 20 years ago. Yeah. She's not with an African American man now.
No, what I'm saying is she told you this story today. This is the first time ever hearing it?
This is the second time I've heard it, but I forgot. I think I blocked it out. 20 years ago, she was dating an African American male, and they were at a park. It was maybe 7:30. They were watching the sunset. It was the dam in Russellville, and they were sitting on the hood of the car, and maybe they were kissing or something. They weren't having sex. They didn't have their clothes off. They were just kissing. Someone called the police on them. The police show up, and this African American male said, "Just don't talk. I know what's going on." And my mom's like, "What the fuck is going on? Gosh, excuse my language. What the hell is going on?"
Talk.
And he was like, just don't even say anything. Just, you need to play it cool. And so there was a woman who was up the hill who saw an African-American male and a white woman and assumed that he was raping her, right? She made this assumption based on the color of the skin of the male and the color of the skin of female. And that happened. How many times have I gotten pulled over because I had an African male in my car when I was 22? There was no reason to be pulled over. They asked for our IDs. Where are you guys going? What are you guys doing? These stories happen all the time. You know, you pulled over driving while black, right? Because we're assuming that you're doing something wrong. We can talk about that forever. But the point is, we have to shift and make a conscious effort to change our assumptions. We have to be thinking about it while we're walking down the street, when we're looking at an interracial couple, when I'm looking at two African Americans together, when I'm looking at two white people together. I need to change that dialogue for myself in my mind.
You do know that it's a thing that people don't believe that the whole driving while black thing is a thing, because they think it's blown out of proportion. I think the media does blow things out of proportion, even in support of so-called black people. They do blow things out of proportion, but this isn't one of them. But people believe this, and I've recently experienced this, not with the cop myself, but this lady came to one of my jobs, and she asked me, she said, Demetrius, older Caucasian woman, she goes, Demetrius, can I ask you something? I almost said her name. I looked at her and I said, I'm Demetrius. You can ask me whatever you want at any time you want. You'll never offend me, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, have you ever been pulled over? And I was like, yeah, I've been pulled over a bunch of times. I've gotten tickets. I've gotten out of tickets. And she was like, but no, I mean, I really don't know how to say this. Using words. That's how you say it. You can't offend me, I promise. Just shoot it to me. I'm not a sensitive person. Shoot it to me. I know your intent. But I mean, like, have you ever just had, like, you know, a rah-rah with the police? What does rah-rah mean? Break that down to me. And she says, well, like, have they ever, like, given you a hard time if you're not, like...
Have police ever harassed you?
And she goes ahead and make the assumptions for me, kind of alludes to my answer for me. She was like, if you... Like, have they ever harassed you? And, like, because if you're doing what you're supposed to do, right, they're not going to, like, do anything to you. Like, they've never roughed you up for no reason, right? Right, Demetrius?
Wrong.
And I was like, dang, I was with you until you got to that point. You can't answer for me. Like, you got to let me answer the question. Yes, I've been pulled over several times. No, I've never in my life been roughed up. I know people. But you can't make this mistake and hear that one so-called black man, one so-called African American did not experience this. Well, guess what? There's hundreds more of me's out there who have never had this experience. I bet you we know other people. And not just drug dealers or people that fit these stereotypes. I'm saying people who are innocent in the scenarios pulled over for no reason. You know, profiled. Please don't make the mistake of finding one person who it didn't happen to. Say, see, it didn't happen to him. You can't do that. It's dangerous.
That happens all the time, right? And I think, I think I encounter that a lot. And I won't say where, but there is a situation that came up recently where a conversation of someone who I love and another person, he's a wealthy white man. And he talked about why he's conservative and why, you know, talked all about these.
That's a very big one.
Yes. Why these, I hate those words. I hate all of them. I wish they never existed, but why it's so important and why these riots are so bad and they raise their children to do it. I've had people attack me on Facebook. Well, you're not raising your children right if they're doing this and they're doing that. You know what I always say to them and what I encourage this person to say to that person was, it must be nice that you don't have to experience that, right? So you could talk about how you treat your kids to respect police and that's why nothing's ever happened to them, but you're not African American. You don't have to live that experience. And that's nice that you don't. But don't make an assumption for somebody else that what they go through doesn't matter or isn't real because you're privileged enough to not have to deal with that. A lot of African Americans' first experience with police officers or law enforcement in general are bad experiences. And they start off when they were kids. When they're 8 years old, when they're playing in the park and they see a drug bust right over here and the guy gets the shit beat out of him. That a lot of scenarios happen to that for young black children or young brown children, Hispanic children too. Right. So if your first experiences with law enforcement are these negative experiences, you're going to be afraid. Right. You're going to run. You're going to be nervous, you know, when somebody pulls you over, even if you've done nothing wrong, right? So I feel like there's just something and just wrong about that conversation that woman had, because she made an assumption based on her life experiences, not your life experience, right?
Ashley, you're literally, and I'm not saying this just because you're here, but anybody who comes on my podcast, I give them their flowers, whether I know them or not. And you seem to be a very great person, a very good person.
Thanks.
I was excited for this conversation, but you were the perfect person to talk to, because things I knew about you, as far as your intelligence and your ability to speak, just like your son spoke about, but also what I did know about you, which is some things you shared with me, and I appreciate you sharing them with me today, such as, how you are aware that you can fall into the category of being a white woman.
Yeah.
Right. And you can fall into the category of not being a white woman.
Sure.
And, that's like the perfect person to speak to, because it's like you can understand what it's like to see things from a privileged way, or you can see things from the way of not so privileged, and you just happen to have the experience of interracial dating.
Yeah. And my son, I have a black son.
Right.
So
how old is he, by the way?
He's 12. And he's, listen, and my son is big. He's as tall as me, and he's big. He's strong. I worry about him. When I've been pulled over before and he was in the car with me, I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm so glad I got pulled over, because I can teach him what to do and how to talk to the police so they don't ever hurt him. I don't think that when I have my son Sergio in the car.
That's a crying shame.
It's a shame, but it's reality. I'm afraid for my son to get older and get stronger and to get bigger, because by default, he's an African American, strong, tall male. Therefore, he's dangerous. That's wrong. So I feel like I wanted to throw myself into the fire, as it were, with you, because I've felt racism before because I loved a different race. Okay, I felt racism before because I'm white and they were black, and that was wrong. I felt racism for my kids before. My son, the day is Hispanic, and the day after Trump was elected, in the hallways of the school,
why did I not think about this?
People were yelling at him, "Get back over the wall, you Mexican." I've experienced it on a visceral level. I'm not an African American. I'm not going to even try to compare what I've experienced to that of what an African American might have experienced, because the shit is way deeper. And I agree with that. I don't have to be afraid when I get pulled over.
Right.
So I'm not going to compare myself, but I've experienced it. I have kids who experience it. My husband, I can't talk about that. There's a lot of scenarios where in these upper levels of businesses, right, your executive levels, it's a table of all white males, right? And there might be one black male.
Okay, you pushing it,
brown,
but yeah, it might be.
But
one.
yeah,
yep.
But I know a scenario. Let's just say where there is one, right, and it's not right. So I feel like I might have been able to bring a different perspective. And I think it's so important, because I think until we bring the idea of racism being something that anybody can experience, and that black people can be racist and Hispanic, Puerto Rican people can be racist amongst each other, racism could hurt people of all colors, of all sexes, of all religion. And until we acknowledge that and realize it's not a black and a white thing, or a white thing against black people, I don't think we're going to make a change. I don't think.
And if you ask me, a lot of times it's not even designed to make a change for the higher ups. It's monetary gain for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And I appreciate you sharing the experience about how it's a thing within your community as well, because it's definitely a light skin, dark skin thing within my community. It's always been, if you darker, if you black, you're being made fun of. The darker you are, you're being made fun of. Because as Chris James put, shout out to you, Chris James, chrisjamesjourney.com, go check him out. He said, just the last episode before this one, he said, if you're, what he say? The closer to, how did he put it? If you're not dark, and the closer to white you are, the closer to right you are. That's what he said. The closer to white, the closer to right. So that the farther away you get from being light or white, the farther away you get from being right. And it's crazy that he put it like that. And I think it's going to be a great segue. You talked about how you dealt with that unfortunate experience with the father of your first child. Yeah.
No,
He's
second.
Second child. Okay, that's right. He's older. Your other son is 12. Okay, is your second child. And that was you all were basically in love, and the grandparents didn't want anything to do with the grandbaby. If you don't mind me asking, is this something that changed over the time?
Yeah. Once they got the paternity test, and I proved, right? I proved
Because you
to
were just
them
automatically a slut just
yes,
because of
I
wow.
proved that their grandchild was their grandchild. They had a document saying that. Then all of a sudden it was, come to our house, stay for the weekend, be around us. Let's take you to our church. We're so proud to have you like as part of our family. It was a very weird situation. And I didn't end up, him and I didn't end up working out in the long run. And I will say, you know, God had a different plan. I met my husband and he is amazing. We're so in love, and God made him for me. And
Congratulations.
I, thank you. I feel really blessed to have that. I waited a long time. I prayed a long time, but I think aside from, you know, the whole fate thing, one of the main reasons I didn't work out is because we didn't have that family support. His family didn't want him to marry a white woman. Right.
Wow.
So
important. Family is so
yeah. So our family
part.
was broken apart before it even was allowed to begin. And I just got lucky, but I was a single parent for a long time. You talk about your experience being a child raised in a single parent household. It makes a difference. I'm sorry. It does. Having a mother and father in the same household who love each other and who grow together and show, you know, set that example. A child is raised differently that way, right? So this family prevented that scenario from happening. And I really do believe that. Now, I will say, after they got the document saying he really was their grandson, they flipped the script and they loved him. They supported him. They raised him. They, when I was in college, when I was a single parent, they took care of him. I mean, and they did. And they're wonderful grandparents. But now his dad is married to an African-American male or woman, and they have this amazing family together. And it's just the best thing ever. And I'm always the white baby mama. The mistake that happened in college, you know, and it's just
first time I've ever heard this experience flipped.
Yeah.
Wow.
But this happens and I encourage you to do this. When you're walking around the campus and you see all these interracial couples, go up and talk to the white girl or man or the Hispanic girl or man and ask how racism has affected them. Not taking anything away
don't do
from...
that. I get it.
It does. It affects a lot of people. And that's also why I don't let my child use the word that you talked about, the N-word.
Yep.
I don't let my kids say that. I don't care if my son is African-American or not. He'll never say that word. I'll slap his mouth. When he goes home, the same thing there. I'm going to raise him, and my son here, who's basically my family's like a United Nations ad, Demetrius. We got all kinds of colors in my house, and I love that. And I love that because I'm teaching my kids to just let's love each other and let's love everybody. You have a heart just like I have a heart. You have a brain just like I have a brain. You have feelings just like I have feelings. What your skin looks like doesn't make a lick of difference to me. And it shouldn't make a lick of difference to my kids. So if my daughter brings home an African-American boy, great. If he treats her right. If he brings home an African-American woman with this amazing afro and this awesomely beautiful dark skin, I'm going to say, fantastic. She a good person.
Right.
That's what we all need to be doing, right?
It's the only thing that matters.
That's the only thing that matters. Love is love.
I want to, every episode at the very end, I give a shout out to a movie, a song, what is it, an album or a book.
Okay.
And I want to give a shout out. I'm going to do something I've never done before, and I'm going to put it on the spot. I'm going to give a shout out, first and foremost, to this movie called Save the Last Dance. It was debuted in 2001. It's the actor Sean Patrick Thomas, And what's her name?
Is it Julia Stiles?
I think you are right. Let's see. It is Sean Patrick and Julia Stiles. Yes, very good. Very good. And Kerry Washington is in it. 2001. This is the older one. Love this movie. If you've never seen it, Save the Last Stand, it actually talks about interracial dating. It's dope. I don't want to give too much away, but this is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's necessary for this episode. And again, if you're with your girl, whether you're in an interracial relationship or not, this is a movie that you can. It's not just solely based on that, but it plays a key role. It plays a key role. So if you've never seen it, go check out Save the Last Dance. And never done it before. It's normally just one. But Miss Figueroa, I get it right?
Yes.
Oh, she got the coolest last name ever. A book, a movie, a song, or an album can fall into any category. I'm putting you on the spot. It does not have to do with interracial dating, interracial anything, your favorite of anything. Just give it a shout out for me.
Oh, man. What's that song, Sergio, that I love by Tupac? Is it Mama?
Dear Mama?
Yes.
Dear Mama. Classic.
I love that song.
That's a sad song. I can't listen to that song.
I love that song. I like
get
a
too
lot of different
emotional.
music, but I feel like that song's important. Is that the one that it says, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice?
Yep.
I love that because I'm okay with that. And I think that that's so true. I like that song.
There you have it. Tupac, Dear Mama. Miss Ashley Figueroa. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I appreciate your time. You blessed me with your time, your knowledge, your experiences, and it's greatly appreciated. And I think the people are going to really love this episode. I think a lot of people have been waiting for this conversation, and we had it. And I think we dived into it and touched on it well. So until next time.
Thank you so much.
All right, we out. Peace.